Welcome to the We Heal for All podcast, emotional and spiritual support for those who feel the world deeply and want to be part of her change. I'm Liz Moyer Ben Farhat. I'm so glad and grateful that you're here. I'm the founder of We Heal for All, the human behind this body of work that's been spiritually calling me to show up for the past 8 years and really explore what is collective healing and what does it offer these times that we're living in. And so what I do in these episodes is I bring you conversations and tools and reflections on the emotional dimension, or kind of the inner world dimension that comes with paying attention to what's happening these days, socially, politically, culturally, environmentally, and caring about it. So this episode today is a conversation with my dear friend, Kahani. Fee is many things. She is a poet, she is an artist, she is a digital nomad traveling the country with her husband and her dog. She is also the host of an excellent conversational podcast called The Sound of Listening. And I mean, that just in and of itself, the sound of listening, it gives you a sense of some of the both meta topics that Fee goes into, everything from spirituality and philosophy and politics to also the groundedness of it. She talks about friendship and AI and just kind of living these days in this topsy-turvy, just highly changing world. And so it came to this theme that I'm playing with this month, which is the theme of not knowing. How really a hallmark feature of the times that we live in is just an inherent discombobulation that leaves so many of us in a place of not knowing, right? In a very genuine way. And how not knowing like that doesn't count us out, right? It doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong or that we're not participating in the right way. It's actually a very honest way of engaging with the world these days. And it also doesn't mean that we are inactive or passive or just kind of floating in outer space. And Fee is an embodiment of this. When I met her a year or so ago and really saw what she was doing in her writing, in her speaking, and in the way that she was going about living her life, I was like, that's awesome. She's someone who's really embodying this practice of not knowing, bringing it into her politics and her life. And what we get into in this conversation, and you'll see it took us in so many different directions, because ultimately what we're talking about here is a capacity to be uncomfortable. It is a ongoing awareness, right? Awareness-based practice of noticing what you notice within yourself when you are confronted with opinions or views that offend one's sensibilities or that goes against, counter to your core beliefs. What Fee shares is about her own way of going about doing that, of noticing that disgust or that repulsion within herself and getting really curious. And so without further ado, please enjoy this conversation between me and Fee. And if you're not already, subscribe or like this video, subscribe to my channel, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Substack, and please consider becoming a paid member of my Substack. It supports this work, this project, and then it also gives you access to meditations and practices on collective healing for your own personal journey. All right, let's get in. Fee Kahani. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh yeah, oh my God, thank you so much. Seriously, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is such a treat. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. In particular, I was just saying this to you before we started recording, but I really see you as somebody who is so committed to the practice of not knowing and really approaching it as a practice, living it in your life from both spirituality. I think you consider yourself to be a spiritual centrist, and even and I don't know if those are terms that you still use for yourself. I'm sure we'll get into it all, but even I've seen terms like political nonduality in your writing and in your podcast and in your work. And in all the different ways that I was like, okay, how do we start this conversation that I'm just so psyched to jump into? The one that stood out to me is something I was so struck by and inspired by. You start many of your Substack posts with, or at least a good chunk of them, with this disclaimer. And I want to just read it for folks. It says, it's the title, and then the subtitle says, "Know that you are loved, you are loved, now, before time, and eternally. This post is likely misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, opinion, fluff, and nonsense. I am flawed. Your mind is your greatest tool." Girl, I'm just going to hand it over to you because that's powerful, man. In this age of so many people being like, I'm right, you're wrong, just such a political tribalness too, in terms of really digging heels into senses of certainty and senses of being correct or right. This is such a breath of fresh air. So maybe you can tell me about where this comes from for you, or why you started sharing that disclaimer.
Thank you so much, Liz. Seriously, I'm so honored to be here. And I'm just so glad that we met. And this is one of those like boons of the internet that I think we are just not seeing these days, which is that people can actually meet like face to face, but heart to heart. And I remember our first conversation, I was just like, yes, like these are the people I need to meet. And this is what has been lacking. And even as I'm saying that, I'm feeling chills because it is what has been missing in my life. And the internet dimension, which I think it is absolutely another dimension. And we forget that we're transitioning dimensions as we go onto the internet. But I really believe that that's what we're doing. That has led to such beautiful growth for me, and you're one of the people where that's happened. So just thank you so much for this. About the disclaimer. So it actually came from Paramhansa Yogananda. He has this quote that I'll read it. He said, "Many people excuse their own faults, but judge others harshly. We should reverse this attitude by excusing other shortcomings and by examining our own." And that's where I have been sitting probably the last like 4 years of my life, I'd say. Maybe like 2020, actually. So 6 years, yeah. So that's where I've been sitting for like the last 6 years of my life, is really looking at myself more clearly and looking at myself in a way that really honors like every part of myself. And I know people hear that, they're like, oh, what does it mean to honor? It sounds super woo-woo. Right. I think to people who actually really need to hear it. And what it means to honor something, and this is what I believe, is that you are with that thing and you are witnessing that thing for the wholeness that's within it, and for the entire entity and the being and the nature and the essence of that thing. Like you could even just take like lip gloss and just be with this and really honor design, right? You can honor font, like you can honor the chemicals, proteins, science, language. Like there's so many ways to honor. And what that really just means is witnessing in a way that's respectful and without judgment. And that's the piece I was missing so much as an activist, was like witnessing without judgment, and acting from a different place too. And I've been learning that the last like 6 years. So that's where that disclaimer came from. And I really wanted to take spiritual centrism, right? Because we talk about political centrism and we talk about non-duality a lot in the spiritual world. But we don't talk about non-duality in politics. And we don't talk about centrism, which sounds like a very technical word, but we don't talk about centrism in spirituality. In spirituality, we'll talk about like centering yourself, but not these like more theoretical, abstract, Marxist sounding concepts that can feel very intellectual and very alienating to people who are just talking conversationally. And so I really wanted to like just mix those together in a way that can like resonate across different realms, but then also be like thought-provoking. That's what I was trying to do. I don't know if that's worked. And then the reason I put that it was propaganda is because someone actually commented that about a piece that I wrote. He actually messaged me and had like a 2 paragraphs of rage against me, which I think I handled pretty well. But yeah, he told me I was creating propaganda. So I was like, oh yeah, I am, right? If you look at the definition of propaganda, it fits, right? It is an agenda-based way of communication that the intention is to shift thinking towards a goal. And it's been used by governments, in different ways. But yeah, we have to own that, right? We have to own that we're coming from bias and we're coming from our lived experiences, which is going to be biased.
It's so good. Well, maybe we even go back to your origin story a little bit, however you want to start that. But you mentioned within your more activist days, maybe you want to share a little bit about your journey pre-2020 that then led you to having these shifts in worldviews or shifts in identity that now has led you to be more in the space that you are now.
So about 4 years ago, I met a friend in a writing class online. We really connected. We talked quite a bit and we wrote very similar types of work, but like in very different ways. And she was a huge source of inspiration for me. And whenever she had any feedback for my writing, for my poems, for my stories, I 100% would listen. And so it was a really great like friendship. It was super rich. It was like deep, very dream forward. When I was considering going to get my master's, which I've been putting off forever, she actually encouraged me. And I remember freaking out so much and having such low confidence about my ability to actually do what I believe I'm here to do. And it was a program at Harvard. It was at Harvard Extension for creative writing and literature. And I was talking to her about it, and she straight up told me, she was like, Fee, if we don't follow our dreams, then what was any of this for? And I remember that just being so like clear to me that even through all the despair, you have to hold on to the dream, because that is actually what makes the dream even more valuable. So she gave me that gift. We didn't really talk politically too much. Like, she kind of knew where I was. I knew where she was in terms of her faith. I'm very open politically. But then as I like started to discover certain things, like we were on opposite sides of like different issues, we would talk about them. And it didn't really go badly. I learned a lot. I was really grateful for it. And then Trump, won the second election. We talked and she was like, I voted for Trump, and kind of explained like why, she voted for Trump. And it made sense to me given like all the other things that I had been sort of hearing. And then I had launched the podcast right around that time. Anyway, and so she was actually one of the first guests. I like completely understand why she voted for Trump. And that was the part that was mind-boggling to me. At the same time, I had about half a dozen people come out to me privately about voting for Trump. And they were not who I expected. These are really highly educated, well-traveled, thoughtful, spiritual healers and guides. And my entire world just shifted. Like, I felt it. I was like, I don't know what reality is. And that's what set in for me. So there's someone called Psychosis Jones on Instagram. He's amazing. But he talks about different realities as a form of psychosis and our lived experiences as being part of a web of lived realities. And if you look at our objective internal experiences, those are the only things we can really know, is our own perception. And then what's out here is subjective reality. And there is no singular reality. And if you've done any medicine journeys, you will know that.
That's right. That's right.
So that really was groundbreaking for me. And our friendship fell apart after that, which was really hard. I tried multiple times. I sent 2 amends emails because I think I hadn't explored the depth of her beliefs in a respectful enough way. And I had hidden my fears from her. As a person who's always been sort of gender questioning, it was really hard to talk about gender with her. And so I didn't, I hid away these parts of myself. If I had allowed those parts of myself to see the light of day, it might have been a little bit different. The true meeting of who we are wouldn't have been so jarring for both of us. And we would have probably handled it a little bit better and with more maturity and compassion and love, because there's love there, right? Like there's love, there's still love. Like for me, this painting she gave me, I think we don't talk about what friendship is enough, and we don't talk about what community is enough, and we don't honor grief enough. It's really hidden how destructive our relationships can be. That's something that I really learned through her. And I learned about my own, what people would judge as like wickedness, which is like essentially hiding, lying, or putting up a front, right? People pleasing, in order to maintain a false harmony that doesn't actually exist. There is no true vulnerability in that. So that's where that started. And of course, it started with the personal. And of course, it started with the spiritual. And of course, it affected the political, because those are all connected for me.
Thank you for that. Especially the vulnerability piece within it all. Not only that, the vulnerability that it takes to share stories like that, but then also just the vulnerable place that I heard you saying yes to within yourself, of being willing to shed and dissolve things within you that keep you disconnected from others. That's part of what I heard in your story. I heard this, and you know what? I think about my own journey of being a super fiery, leftist activist, and I'm still, you know what I mean? Those are my roots. I'm progressive by nature, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going anywhere. But in my younger years, when I was like 20 and I was first awakening to the reality of the world, the reality of injustice, to really thinking about systems and systems of oppression and just the haves and have-nots, blah, 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 blah. There was such a surefire, like, I know what's right. I know what's wrong. Why are we not all, burning shit down? Why are we not all, galvanizing around this, right? And it was through many years of just eating humble pie, both by like going out there and actually trying to do social change, actually like working in the field, working in nonprofits and, programs that aim to advance social progress, to being through different political cycles and cultural moments that also rocked my world and shook some of the foundational assuredness that like not only my political beliefs were rooted in, but also like my sense of self was just baked in, right? I was like, I know what's going on in the world. I know what's good. I know what's bad. And so of course I'm over here with the good guys, you know what I mean? Like I'm good, And then part of my story, at least, is being in part of a really politically diverse family that really, and you and I have talked about this before too, that really shook my own sense of values around inclusion and being inclusive of viewpoints that, come from, participatory democracy, right? Like everyone has a voice, but in terms of the way that I was being politically shaped within, the cultural makeup of kind of left-leaning activism, there wasn't actually room for that. This process, for me at least, of being rocked by either a new experience, new information, whatever it might be, grieving, like you were saying, right? Letting something die a bit. You know what I mean? Something that created comfort for me, that created like a sense of home, a sense of, and then being in a more like liminal space, like a kind of softer, more like, okay, I don't, totally know where I am, but I don't know. It's so interesting. There's something freeing in it. There's something disorienting, but there's also something that feels so like ripe and pertinent to these times that we're living in, where, to your point, we're in this age of the internet where we are traversing different dimensions of subjective reality, depending on whose rabbit hole you are going down. And so I think there's a lot of people experiencing right now that process of having things shook up and grieving, hospicing things, and then allowing new things to be birthed. Yeah, I'll pass the ball back to you because I just feel like I feel that in your story so much, and that you live that, and you're such like an awesome example of embodying that journey and being committed to it.
Thank you, Liz. I totally resonate with the piece of like seeing reality and seeing suffering and seeing injustice and wanting to do something about it. And I think that's something that we have had since really young. It is something that children are wired for. And there was this video of a mom with her two daughters, and they had 3 plates. And what she did is she put 2 cookies in one plate, 1 cookie in another, and no cookies in the third plate. And then she like revealed what was in each plate. The older daughter, there was an extra cookie in her plate, and that the mom had a cookie and she had 2 and her sister had none. And what she did is she was like, oh my God, how did this happen? Like, how could this happen? And then she took her cookie and she put it in the younger daughter's plate, and I cried. I straight up just started crying because I was like, oh my gosh. And you could see the younger daughter being like, oh my God. And they clapped and they were cheering. And it was just this moment of like, justice is inherent. It's inherent within us. And so what you're talking about, you know, I think it comes from sensitivity. I think it comes from being a sensitive child. And my partner and I are listening to The Highly Sensitive Person, the OG book. And
Nice.
It just reminds me of so much of what we need to be reminded of again and again, that sensitivity is not a bad thing. And I actually think that one of the reasons we get so rigid and dogmatic about our sensitivity is because it's so unheard. And I really feel like the leftist activists, and I am one of y'all leftist activists, okay?
That's right, man.
We need so much more healing than we've received. We need so much more healing than we've received. And I don't think that, you know, spiritual healing, psychological healing, any type of healing is a replacement for activism. I think it sustains activism. Like, that's what I was getting wrong, because I was running all of my activist tendencies on nothing. I had no financial resources. I was broke as heck. I had no emotional resources. I was in all kinds of substances. I was living all kinds of dysfunctional ways. And no one's going to listen to you when you're like that. No one's going to listen to you because you're not making sense and you're not living a well-nourished, expansive, grounded, loving life, and a life that's loving to yourself. And like, I think uncovering that on the left is going to be super important, because those are universal human needs. And my friend like Erica, she talks about this too, about needs-based communication and compassionate communication and nonviolent communication. And when you really listen to, you know, the people you don't agree with, there are core human needs at the bottom. And we talked about this before too. And I loved what you had said last time too. And also in the other videos I've watched, that what's underneath it is a need, a human need. And it's the meeting of like, you know, animus or animal and like what they call angel, right? Like those two places, it's like divinity and earth. We're going to be connected to these primal parts of ourselves, the human animal. We are the human animal, right? But we have this consciousness that is able to turn on and look at itself. That is what we have as the human animal. Other animals don't have that. They don't have the observer that can turn within. That, I think, is what I really discovered, and my activism has completely changed since then. I'm not the kind of activist I used to be, but I'm still extremely involved. And the more that I try to learn, let's just take any war right now that's happening. The more I read about these conflicts, the more I felt confused. Literally. I literally was like, I can't keep track. I was like, okay, yeah, they attacked here and they used this. But then what happened? Okay, yeah, this country reacted like that, which caused this price to shift here. And then that led to an assassination here. Okay, but then that assassination was for this group that's actually you see what I'm saying? And I was like, okay, this is beyond me. This is absolutely undeniably beyond me. And the thing that I feel that isn't beyond me is what's within me. And as I started to explore my inner landscape, which is the only landscape I can really, truly, actually know with 100% certainty, is what's within me. And once I did that, and I'm still doing that, it's an ongoing process. I keep uncovering new things, and I can talk about one of the things I'd recommend for anybody who wants to do this. Once I started experiencing and going within, that really shifted reality for me. And I'll share something from a meditation and two-way prayer that I was doing recently. So I was essentially asking like the super consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, from whatever faith you're a part of, or even if you're an atheist, looking at it, which I was an atheist for 24 years, right? So even looking at it from an atheist perspective, there is an inner knowing, and that's something I could resonate with. And there's a higher self, like it's your idealized, perfect self, not in this way of like perfectionism, but like all your greatest traits magnified and amplified into a being, right? That's something I could do as an atheist. So if you're looking at it from that point of view also, there is this like way to connect within to that part of yourself that is aware. It's an aware part. And as I was doing that in two-way prayer, what I was working through is a filter in my perception that is broken, which is the filter of receiving love. I have multiple close relationships in my life where they tell me that no matter what they do, it feels like the love doesn't land and I don't let it in, or I doubt the sincerity of their love for me. So in this two-way prayer, I was asking my inner knowing, my higher consciousness, why does love never land for me? No matter what someone does, why do I always doubt that they truly do love me? The answer that came back, and I'll read it, sweet baby, you do not accept reality. And so how could you ever accept love? And that was it. I was like, oh my gosh,
Chills.
like, right? Chills. And I was like, and that was not from me, by the way. It was like, where did this come from? I don't know who said that, but it's brilliant.
That's right. That's
and
right.
Yeah. And so that has really been informing me, is acceptance.
Can't accept reality. So how can you accept love? I mean, it makes me think of so much stuff, honestly. Just circling back to what you started us with, of just honoring what is and really witnessing fully the wholeness of what is in front of us. It means including all the things at the table. It means including the table itself and the gum that's stuck underneath the table and the rickety leg and, you know, the shit that we don't want to see. What I hear in this message, this guidance, is just that inverse relationship, or that it's more actually of like a reciprocal relationship of the more that we as individuals are able to accept reality and like build our capacity to accept reality too. The like sincere discomfort and pain and again grief and like letting go process, the death and dying process that comes with actually really authentically showing up and stepping into that, is actually the way. When we create more space for that, then we also create more space for all the gifts and the boons and the love.
Yeah, and you're talking about capacity, and I think right now globally our capacity it's being taken from us in many ways, and we're giving it away too. It's both. And I really agree with you about capacity, because it can feel like you should be able to. You may not be able to, and that's okay. And
Tell me more about that. What you mean by like our capacities being taken away?
Well, yeah. Okay. So for example, like I work less than I used to. I used to work a lot, like a maniac. I still overwork in some ways, but when I had health issues pop up, I had to really look at work. Honestly, I had to take an income hit to take care of my health. And as I did that, life has changed. And I'm very lucky to be with somebody also who's like financially doing well. And we're doing pretty okay because we've been really wise about a lot of different things. So I know that I have the capacity to kind of like engage with things that if I was more broke than I am now, I wouldn't have the capacity to. And if I was overworking, I wouldn't have the capacity to take care of my health. Like I'm down like 51 pounds. I haven't had a flare up in 6 months. I've been lifting weights. And so the chronic pain and fatigue that I used to feel, like I don't have that anymore, which is just freaking incredible for me. But it did require letting go. Yeah, it did require letting go of career, of this concept of like how work should be. And before I was able to create capacity, it was unreasonable to expect myself to be able to be compassionate for myself or others. And that's why they always teach you self-compassion, because until you can do it for yourself, it's not going to be possible to do it for others. Even loving others, like until you can really love yourself in this like way, or even receive love. If you can't receive love, what are you giving to others? You know what I mean? We have to really allow it to, like you said earlier, blossom, right? We have to allow that blossoming inside of us. And then from there will be abundance. And like, if you've ever had a garden or like a fruit tree, you know that like, boom, abundance. Like suddenly I have like 200 lemons and I'm like, no, what do I do with lemons? Like,
Who wants some lemons? Yeah.
Yeah. Or even if you have chickens, right? Okay. Way too many eggs all of a sudden, right? You have goat farm, like a goat farm, too much milk. There's abundance in earth. Earth is just naturally set up that way and hopefully stays that way. But until we tap into that, like you were saying, we're not going to be able to give it to anybody else. And it also happens in relationship, like what you share about community. I completely agree with. I think that we need relational healing. We need to relate to somebody in order to heal. And I think like what's happening politically is like what I have said before, which is like global shadow work, essentially.
So within your experience of not knowing, because again, I just see you as somebody who really lives it. Can you share like what that looks like in practice for you in your day-to-day life? Because I think so often, you know, the idea of not knowing, it's like, okay, yeah, we live in a confusing time. I get not knowing. But I think sometimes too, that can lead to people either being pushed and pulled by every whim that they, you know, comes across their doorway, or it's almost like an excuse to duck out and be like, okay, I can't do anything. I'm just going to kind of float here in outer space because I really can't know. And I'm wondering if you could share just like, how do you actually live not knowing in a way that is still involves taking steps, or still involves being politically active or being in relationship with others?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the people that I'm learning from right now, her name's Emerald from the Diamond Net on YouTube. She has a shadow work program. And so I'm learning a lot from her. And one of the things that she's really emphasized is like that there are helpful thoughts and there are not helpful thoughts. And there is a way to like helpfully understand reality. So essentially not bottoming out into nihilism, which we have all probably done at some point in our lives. 100%. And some of us may still be there too in like different ways. But really looking at whether something is helpful or not is a really good question to ask yourself if you're in the depths of your despair, of realizing how ineffective your efforts can be in the grand scheme of things. And then looking at like, okay, well, I'm feeling really dejected, or I'm feeling like there's nothing that I can do. Is that helpful? Is that helpful to think that there's nothing that you can do? And generally, most people, if they're not in a certain mindset, would say, no, it's not helpful to think that there is nothing that I can do. It is more helpful to think that there is something that I can do sometimes. And it may not land how I'm hoping it'll land, or it may not do what I'm hoping it'll do, but there is something that I can do that would be helpful for me or a little helpful for somebody else. So asking yourself that is like really, really important. One situation where I embraced sort of an open way of thinking is this person online who was sharing about how women make 65 or 70% of all purchases in America, of all consumer spending, is women. And I remember like hearing that and being like, that does not sound right. Like that's some sexist shit, you know? And it's actually not. So women make the purchases for the household probably on a daily basis is what I discovered. Vacations and homes, like furniture, children's things that children need, animal things that animals need and pets need. Those are all decisions that are either held by the women or initiated or paid for. Women are also like starting to outpace men now in income in certain demographics. And then when you dig deeper on that, of course, there are like a lot of nuances again. So the more you try to, dig deep on it, you're going to find this humbleness that we're talking about and humility of realizing how impossible it can be to really understand something truly that's outside of you. And the other thing that I was reading is that women hold, I think, 60% of the wealth in America, which I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So when he was sharing that, you know, my initial reaction was just like repulsed, right? I was repulsed. I was like repelled. Also, I bounced off of the idea, right? Completely. Just pure rejection. And I've learned to notice that reaction in me and really discover where the disgust is sort of coming from, and like go within to that part of myself, and then actually like look into what this person has said. One of the things I discovered in meditation is that I think a lot of us are actually walking the middle path of the extremes that we know. So I think most people are reasonable. I know, mind-boggling. But like, I really think people are.
I do too. I know it's like a scandalous thing to say, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and they may just be purview to all kinds of realities that we haven't even touched. So to us, they look completely unhinged and unreasonable. For example, my mother, when I bought a yellow truck, she was like, "You can't buy a truck. You're a girl. You can't, like, girls can't buy trucks. What am I?" And I was like, "Oh, I can buy a truck." And then I bought the truck. It was yellow, which is her favorite color. And I took her and we went tailgating and like,
love it.
And she was like, "Okay, I love trucks." And we went, we went out to the Sierra Nevadas and we sat, and we could hear like the wolves, you know, running around, and we watched shooting stars. And she was like, "I love trucks." So yeah, but like for her, for where she came from, for how women were supposed to behave, her father, my grandfather, was like connected to Gandhi and Nehru and all these like people in India, and was very much a part of this like, you know, government system that was based on different forms of colonialism, whether you're looking at the Mughal Empire or the British Empire, right? So propriety was like a very important concept. So that's where she's coming from. And from her point of view, she's extremely liberal. She's like, yeah, she thinks she's very, very, you know, forward thinking. Like, I've really learned to honor that like people are really trying to grapple with the extremes and are trying to walk what they consider their middle path. And that gives me some solace, you know, even if I see them doing really unhinged things that I may judge. And I'll share one story about this. Did you want to say something before I share the story?
No, please go for it. Well, actually, no, I'll reflect back just really quickly, because I just want to like underscore that practice that you do with yourself of just that awareness-based practice of noticing what you notice within yourself when you are met with something that, you know, challenges your views or goes against what you believe, or just that kind of repulsion, that disgust, and the fact that you then invite yourself, you hold that with curiosity. One, you notice it, and then two, you invite yourself to be curious about it and explore it in order to better understand yourself, so that you can engage with what's in front of you with more reality, right? To come back to that message you received earlier. So I just wanted to put a pin in that because I thought that was really powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and it requires capacity. So if it's something that people can't do, the first step would be to figure out why. Sometimes it's that you're caregiving for somebody else and you don't have any capacity to go within because it's taking up so much of your time. So self-exploration is on the back burner. And that's okay. That's really okay. And people often say we can't tolerate intolerance. And I actually don't agree. If nobody has tolerance, like, what are we doing? Like, someone has to do it first. You know what I mean?
Right.
Unfortunately, like, it just is that way. So if you have the capacity for tolerance, and this is actually, they use it in addiction therapy, distress tolerance is literally a therapeutic technique to deal with substance use. It applies to politics as well. You can take the same concept and apply to politics. And so one of the like communities and groups that I'm a part of is a 12-step program. And if you don't know what those are, just like Google it. There are a lot of them out there. One that I really recommend is called Codependence Anonymous. And it's really, really good. So I would recommend looking into that. So in one of the 12-step programs that I'm in, I sort of learned to find internal compassion within myself And the way that I did that was through two-way prayer, which is where you sort of journal through questions to your inner, the deepest part of yourself, the truest part of yourself, which is like, in my belief, like that is our higher consciousness. And so as I was doing that, I have to like make amends, right? That's step 9. So what came up for me was this hamster that I had when I was, I think, 20, and it was really cute. I loved it. And it was in this little hamster like cage, and I got it all these extra parts so it could like run more. You know, it had like tunnels, it had like a wheel at the top. It was really big. I kept it in the garage at my parents' house while I was living there. Yeah, I just like had a great time. And I would go in there and clean it out, make sure it's okay. And then sometimes I would even take it out to just like let it run around the garage. One time I was cleaning out the cage and I did something I think that scared it. I'm not sure, but it bit me on my like finger, and I accidentally dropped it all the way to the floor, like from standing level, and it survived. And it was running around, and then I caught it and put it back in the cage. That weekend there was a heat wave, and so I was indoors most of the weekend, and I went out a few times, but I completely forgot about the hamster, like completely just forgot about the hamster. And I think it was like some point towards the end of the weekend, I was like, and I went in there and it had died. Yeah. And
So sorry.
it had died and it looked so bad. And I could tell like all the bedding had been like, you know, moved around. And I realized like, oh my God, it was like in this cage in the garage trying to get, like, there was no way to get out. You know, it had no choice. And that was because of me. And so I kind of have been journaling about that whole experience and really trying to face whether I had resentment towards this animal that bit me. And so I neglected it, right? Consciously, unconsciously, what happened there? That there was a rupture in my need to care for it, in my responsibility to care for it, right? And I don't know if there was like any true resentment and like true maliciousness. I'm like still trying to like really look at that. And or was there just like a, oh my God, I want to stay away from this thing that's hurt me. And the heat wave happened, so I was focusing on myself and not really thinking about helping or caring for another creature, and just really focusing on my own needs. And I'm still working through that. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and we kind of realized that the way I've treated my animals ever since then, it's like that hamster informs like every decision with my pets now. Like they have to always have a way out. There has to be like care for them. I have to keep them top of mind. Like they are in my care. And that means something. Like it actually means something that their life is in my hands. I take that with me, right? Not as a way of like beating myself up, but just as like a reminder that quality of life can be achieved and that we can like have beautiful things. And I wouldn't have got that if I wasn't going through the amends process, or what they call inventories, essentially, of looking at your own traits that you find repulsive, that you bounce right off of and don't want to face. And so as I'm doing that process, there's a lot of healing for me that's happening. And it's also shifted actually my relationships. And my relationships are much more loving and compassionate now because I'm owning up to some of these parts of myself, and I think others can pick up on it through whatever way, you know, whatever you believe. So yeah, that was the story there.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. It's so poignant and layered and filled with so much. What was your hamster's name?
I literally don't remember.
You don't even remember? That's cool though. That's all good. Yeah, just
I don't remember because it was like 16 years ago, and I'm trying to remember, and like I literally can't even remember. And I know I named it. Like I know I did.
But just kind of just like feeling that little being's presence, and like I don't know, this might be a weird question, but what's it like for you to do this amends process, or even people who are familiar or not familiar with 12 steps, or are kind of familiar with that like inner work, turning inward, looking at shadow side, or just things that have been exiled or tucked away, or that but that's still are there, I'm wondering if you can, talk about just what that kind of felt experience is like going through that for you right now, or doing that work right now.
Yeah. So I'll like give another example. I was talking to my friend about how I speak, I've run a couple of events and like kind of how I talk in the events and what happens for me internally as I'm sharing a message that I feel is really important, and how hard it can be to really get that message across in a solid way that I feel flows without like panic, essentially. And so we were talking about this, and she actually connected it back to anger. And she said it's unexpressed anger. When she told me that, I immediately was like, no. And I even told her, I was like, her name's Erica Lieb. She does like dance and movement related healing. But I told her when she told me that it was anger and unprocessed anger, I hated that. And I was like, that's so annoying.
Right.
Because sometimes, and she said, like, talked about like being witnessed in the purest form of our feelings and how important that can be, and allowing that to happen. And there is still a resistance within me. And I don't think resistance is bad inherently. It's just like more information. Every feeling has a gift, right? I think Ning was talking about this in one of the videos with like emotion. She said, what's inside of this? And kind of my lesson that I've also learned from another person called Jennifer Hiranya, she's on Quora. These are all my teachers, okay? By the way, I'm just telling you
I love that.
Like everybody yes. I learned from.
I love that.
Because sometimes like people want to like not share what they know and who they know and where they learned it from, and try to keep these things or like claim them. And like, I just want to make sure that I'm like correctly giving credit to where I've learned these things from, including, friends of Bill's. Anyway, so what she kind of shared is that like every emotion has a gift within it. So anger, right? I think you talked about this too. Anger has protection within it, right? So you might be needing self-soothing actually, or you might be needing to listen to yourself deeper. For me, guilt is a big one. So with guilt, there's a lot of remorse. And the flip of that, the gift of that is actually gratitude and wisdom, and kind of learning to see the shadow of these negative feelings, which are the positive gifts, because the shadow is the inverse, right? So I've kind of been like working through that, but usually it comes with a certain level of discomfort, and that requires time. I've really been learning that it's very important to make space and time for our emotions and to process them in whatever way that we can. And for me, the fastest is like recording voice notes or journaling. And I do a specific type of like two-way prayer journaling too, which is really helpful. So that's kind of how I've been navigating that. And I'm not perfect. I've learned that. I've really learned that through the amends process. I've asked close like loved ones, like, for things that I've done that have harmed them and that they'd like amends for. And it was not what I expected, y'all. Like, it was just not like, I was like, that's upsetting you. And the things that I was ready to amend for, they're like, I don't care about that. And it's like so much disconnect, even with people who I communicate really well with. Yeah. So just realizing how impossible it can be to change the world, right? When we face the limitations of what we can do within our own relationships, we see how unbudgeable so many things are. And then we see that things are kind of the way that they're sort of meant to be, and that they've reached the present is like the natural conclusion of everything that came before it, even if you don't understand why it happened. Right. It's reasonable. It's actually reasonable. You can anyway,
track it and see. I love what you just shared there around, speaking of capacity, just the capacity that you've developed for yourself and that you are modeling through what you're sharing here, of being willing to be uncomfortable and putting yourself in situations, thinking about this amends process with people in your life. Just get this image of having enough fortitude within yourself, where enough security within yourself. It's like this like really strong base, and then this kind of like open, soft perimeter, where it's like, okay, I am solid enough, I'm strong enough, I'm capable enough to enter into this space of potential conflict, this space of feedback, this space of not knowing, of being confronted with beliefs or ideas that, might rub up against me or brush up against certain stuff, da 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 da. But this kind of beautiful posturing of having enough internal steadiness that then you could still be receptive and open to changing and to taking in new inputs. I know this conversation took us in so many different directions, and it's because it's all connected. Honestly, it's because it's all connected. The things that we practice in our interpersonal relationships are the things that we also practice or can practice in our politics and in the way that we engage with the world, and in this very like parasocial reality of the internet and of ideas and opinions, and that are shaping our sense of self, right? That are shaping how we perceive ourselves, where we belong, which is tied to how we perceive what's going on in the world. And so I just want to thank you for all that.
Yeah. And Brene Brown, I know everyone has opinions about Brene Brown, but one of the things that she said was, strong back, soft front, and wild heart. And I think that's like, we have to have all of those different parts, kind of like what you're saying. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just as we're wrapping up here, how can people find you? How can people connect with you?
The best way to find me is on Substack. It's The Sound of Listening is the name of the podcast, and the newsletter and event bulletin that's what my Substack has become. And you can also find links to my Instagram account on there. And because I do put out different videos about different things, so that are related to like politics or realizations or relationships, friendships, and then different events that I do that Liz has also been a part of.
Well, I highly recommend checking out Fee's work and just being in her orbit, because she is a breath of fresh air out there. So thank you so much for all you do and being who you are.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you to you and your heart, and for being here. If you enjoyed this episode and received from it, send it to a friend and use it as a way to build community and connection that this world deeply needs right now. Subscribe to tune in each week for more tools, conversations, and support on collective healing. And check out my latest book, When the World Hurts, upcoming circles, and online courses to go deeper. Sending you love from the Bronx. Take care.